friends, welcome to my channel. My name is Jackie if you're new here, which most of you probably are because this is my first book YouTube video. My first YouTube video surrounding books. But if you're new here, I'm so happy to see you and that you're joining me for this video talking about my top 12 books of 2020. Before we get into those books though, I did want to talk about the book that I'm currently reading because hopefully as I continue to make these YouTube videos, I can talk to you a little bit about the books that I'm currently reading or have, you know, just an update for you every time on that. So right now I am reading These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong. I have to say I was a little bit hesitant starting this book at first. For no reason really, except that it was all over Book Talk and I get scared of the hype sometimes. But it's actually amazing so far. I'm on chapter 12. I'm a big fantasy reader and These Violent Delights is a Romeo and Juliet retelling based in Shanghai, but with like violence and rival gang members and some intrigue and some romance and things like that. So I'm only on chapter 12, but I really like it so far. So I just wanted to start off by telling you that. And now we can dive into my top 12 books of 2020. I have 12 books for you today because that was as far as I could narrow it down, to be honest. I loved all of these books so much. And 2020, though not the best year, it was a pretty good reading year for me. So I did find a lot of books that I really loved. And I feel like within this too is a good mix of genres. So hopefully if you're watching this, you'll be able to find a book that resonates with you. I kind of split these up not by my favorite, but by what genres they're in. And I do have one book that was kind of my favorite of the year, but I'll talk about that more towards the end. So right now I'm gonna talk about just realistic fiction books. And so my first book is, and I'm referencing my phone because I did read this at the beginning of 2020. So my first book that I want to talk to you guys about today is The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna. And I know that Kristen Hanna gets a lot of praise for her book, The Nightingale. And that was an amazing story as well. I loved it. However, I like this one better, which a lot of people are shocked to hear. But okay, so getting into the description really quick for you, and I'm gonna try to make talking about these as quick as possible because I have a tendency to ramble. Okay, so I'm just gonna read you the beginning of this blurb about it, but right up front I want to tell you that there is a trigger warning for domestic abuse. So if that is something that would really bother you reading about, feel free to skip this book or to skip ahead a little bit. But I'll just read a little bit of the blurb for you quickly. Alaska, 1974. Unpredictable, unforgiving, untamed. For a family in crisis, it's the ultimate test of survival. So I feel like that kind of sets the stage well. There's a mother, a father, and a daughter that love each other, but the father is a war veteran and has a lot of PTSD, and often you find that he is abusive to the mother. And this family is always moving because the father is just excited about this next best thing. This next place or this next home is what's gonna do it for them, is what's gonna make them happy. So when the father loses another job, he decides that the family, this next thing that's gonna make them happy is moving to Alaska, the last true frontier, right? This wild, beautiful place. And he thinks that with no rules or you know, very little rules, off the grid, that's where they're gonna be happy finally as a family, and he's gonna be better. And the family has to learn how to survive in Alaska and rely on these amazing, strong women in the community, in their small community. So basically, this book talks about, you know, this family's survival in Alaska and how at first things are better for the family and then worse when, you know, it's constant night in the winter and the father just gets, you know, back and forth with his moods, and the daughter learns strength and how to survive from her community and from her mother. And you know, this book is really impactful because the family really does love each other. There is so much love that the daughter feels for the mother and the father, the good moments they do have. So it makes this story really complex, and I think just really powerful. There's love in this story. There's survival, of course. I've mentioned that a million times. There's learning how to break the cycle of abuse, and getting out of a bad situation. And of course, you know, I love it. There's really, really strong female leads in this story. So it's an incredible book. I hope I did it justice. Okay, next I want to talk about Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reed. So this description is not as long in Goodreads, so I'm just gonna go ahead and read the description for you really quick. So, in the midst of a family crisis one late evening, white blogger Alex Chamberlain calls her African-American babysitter Amira, asking her to take toddler Briar to the local market for distraction. There, a security guard accuses Amira of kidnapping Briar, and Alex's efforts to right the situation turn out to be good intentions, selfishly mismanaged. So that is the blurb. This book is incredibly powerful, and Kylie Reed is an amazing author. She's actually a University of Iowa grad, and that was perfect timing because that was just my screensaver. And I graduated from Iowa as well. She was in the University of Iowa Writers Workshop. I actually got to hear her speak on a Zoom call put on by Iowa, talking about Such a Fun Age and her experience writing the book, and just more about it and her insight into writing it. And so it talks about, you know, all these important topics surrounding race, love, privilege, you know, just these really important things that are incredibly current to what we've been talking about in the United States, especially in 2020. So this was an incredible book. I think one of the most impactful things about this book was that it made me incredibly uncomfortable. So the main character, Alex, or one of the main characters, Alex, I mean, she's the wealthy mother that employs Amira. She is so, like, overboard in trying to be woke, and her actions are so harmful. And I think it can really teach people a lot. So highly recommend that one. Okay. So the next book we were talking about, so I'm kind of making a shift into memoirs, so nonfiction books. The first one I wanted to talk about was Good Talk by Mira Jacob. And so Good Talk follows Mira in New York City with her son and husband, her mixed-race son and her husband, and kind of follows what it's like to be brown in America after 9/11 and the microaggressions that happen every single day for brown people in America. And I think it was just another really, like, tying into Such a Fun Age. It's such an eye-opening read, but it was incredible because it's this graphic memoir, so it's graphic novel style, and it was also funny. It made me laugh, but it also made me realize, you know, some of these microaggressions that happen to people every single day in the US. I next wanted to talk about Educated by Tara Westover. So this was, I keep saying this, I sound like a broken record, also an amazing read. It was incredible. It's basically about this young woman, Tara, that has never stepped into a classroom until she is 17 years old. So the whole kind of story is her growing up in a family that is Mormon and believes in kind of the alt-Mormon views. So like thinking the end of days are coming. They spend their summers, you know, preparing food in the cellar and putting it in the cellar. And then, you know, she works in her father's junkyard. She works as a midwife. She does all these things from this incredibly young age. And she never gets the chance to truly be educated. You know, her mom tries to teach her some things, but it's just not the family's priority to be educated. The priority is preparing for this end of days that's coming soon, right? And another trigger warning here, there is abuse from the family at points, but I think Tara does an incredible job of talking about her journey to becoming educated, and she doesn't bash religion at all in this, which I find a powerful aspect of it as well. She's not saying that there's anything wrong with being religious, just her experience going from this super alt-religious family into getting into college somehow, you know, and cheating the system so she could get into college even though she'd never been in any type of schooling really, except for informal from her mom sometimes when they felt like it. So it talks about her and her siblings, them growing up, her relationship with the church, with her father, with her family. It is just a really moving story of one woman's journey to becoming educated. I kind of want to jump into the next genre here, which is rom-coms. I love this genre so much. I think it is so much fun. It's probably tied for me with fantasy as my favorite genre of books to read. I don't know, I just love it. I think you can tackle incredibly powerful stories and important topics in a way that is funny and romantic, and I just love it. So one of the books I first want to talk about in this genre is A Cuban Girl's Guide to Tea and Tomorrow by Laura Taylor Namey. So this book was so much fun, and it was really beautiful. It kind of follows this girl Lila, who lives in Miami, and with her big wonderful Cuban family, and they love each other so much, and Lila is ready to take over her family's business with her sister. They own a bakery in Miami, and she's this incredible baker, but she goes through 3 really hard heartbreaks of different kinds, and kind of falls into this slump, and her family wants to see her, you know, feeling better and doing better, and so they send her to Winchester in England for the summer. And so basically she goes to stay with a family member in this small English town who owns a bed and breakfast, and she is very resistant to the idea of going. She wants to be in Miami. She never wants to leave Miami. She's, you know, in love with her life there aside from her heartbreaks, but her parents just know she's in this funk in her family, and so they send her to England for the summer to get refreshed. And you know, she ends up resisting as much as she can at first, and then she of course turns to the kitchen for comfort because she is this incredible baker, and she starts helping out the cook in the bed and breakfast at her family member's bed and breakfast, and she starts incorporating some of her, you know, Cuban recipes into the English ones, and it's this really beautiful story of how she falls in love with England, and that doesn't lessen her love for Miami either, or for her family. And it just ends up being this amazing story of like love and family and chosen family. It's just really great. So it definitely made me so happy to read. I loved the blending of both cultures, and I just love the whole story. It was beautiful, and it makes you hungry. It talks about all this amazing Cuban food, and I think my stomach was growling the whole time. Okay, next I want to talk about one I'm really excited about, You Deserve Each Other by Sarah Hoggle. I hope I said her last name right. So let me just read the little description. When your nemesis also happens to be your fiance, happily ever after becomes a lot more complicated in this wickedly funny lovers to enemies to lovers romantic comedy debut. So I think that kind of says it all, but this book was so refreshing because it was not your typical, like, you know, these characters meet, they fall in love. No, we start out with them hating each other. They're already engaged. They already had this love story that we learn later. They're already engaged, but now they hate each other. They can't stand each other. Neither of them, though, wants to call off the wedding. And so that's when we get into all this hijinks. They end up pranking each other and, you know, trying to get the other one to break up with the other. And it is hilarious. They kind of end up having the most fun that they've ever had while they are out pranking each other, while they are trying to prank each other and just letting go of all their facades of how they were acting before, trying to be the perfect partner. And so I just loved this book so much because it made me die laughing constantly, but it was also really beautiful. You find out how sometimes you're so caught up in being this version of yourself that somebody else thinks that they want, or that you think that they want. But really the best is just being yourself and being true to who you are and what it means to really be a partner. So this book was a lot of fun. One of my favorite books that I read this year and of all time is Love in Other Words by Christina Lauren. So this novel follows Macy, and it kind of goes back and forth from, you know, her youth to where she is currently now. So Macy at a very young age lost her mother and was still very close with her father. Her father had ended up buying a weekend house for them to get away in a different part of California, and next door to them was this amazing family and this boy Elliot that Macy befriends. But when we get to current times, Macy and Elliot are just meeting again after 10 years because something happened where Macy ended up cutting Elliot off, and we don't know what it is until the end, the reason that this happened. So it kind of flashes back and forth. It's this beautiful, like, love story of young love and then separating and seeing what happens when you come back together, and devotion. It made me cry. It talks so much about family as well, and what, you know, our family means to us. So I highly recommend this book, like I've said about every other one, but this is one of my favorite of all time. I recently just had a friend read it, actually, and I forgot to warn her that it was really sad. And so she, like, or not really sad, but it makes you cry. It ends happy, but it makes you cry. And so she was shocked that she was bawling by the end, but she loved it too. So I love books that make me cry also. Okay, short little one here, but this made my top 12 books of the year though. But just a little short shout out to Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. So this is a classic, but I have never tried to read it. The classics, sometimes I try to read them and I like a good amount of them, but for some reason this one never called to me. I should have known. It's the original, Enemies to Lovers. Absolutely loved it. It was incredible. That's all I have to say. So now we're moving on to one of my other favorite genres, which is fantasy. So I am a huge fantasy girl. I have always loved fantasy ever since I was really little. Harry Potter, Cassandra Clare, Sarah J Maas, you name it. So right now though, I want to talk about From Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout. So this book, I don't even know if I can explain it that well, but I'll use the blurb for help, and I don't want to give anything away. But this book is definitely high fantasy. There are gods, there are these people called the Ascended, there's like this war going on, and then there's this woman, Poppy, this girl Poppy, she's I think 19 when this book starts. She is the maiden, so she's chosen from birth to usher in a new era. So her life has never been her own. The life of the maiden is solitary, never to be touched, never to be looked upon, never to be spoken to. And she's waiting for her ascension, which is her day when she like gets closer to the gods kind of, and turns into one of the Ascended, which are these like more powerful ruling class. And so Poppy basically always has to wear this veil. Her life is not her own, but underneath all this, she has this incredibly adventurous spirit. She loves exploring, and her mind is her own, but even so, she's had to stay under this veil the whole time, and her tutors and the people that, you know, watch over her are very, very strict as well. The Ascended that watch over her, and you know, they will punish her if she steps out of line and things like that. So her guard, one of her guards is like a father figure to her and has taught her how to protect herself, which is not allowed for a maiden, but it all kind of ties into how she's this like really strong, independent person, despite being so constricted her whole life. So Poppy ends up getting a new guard, Hawk, And he challenges everything that she thought she believed, and, you know, really views her as a person instead of this maiden who is supposed to be so pure and like stifled and everything. And he challenges all of that. And so with that happening, she has this awakening kind of and I don't know, I don't want to give anything away. I'll read this part of it too. A fallen kingdom is rising once more, determined to take back what they believe is theirs through violence and vengeance. And as the shadow of the curse draws closer, a line between what is forbidden and what is right becomes blurred. Poppy is not the only one on the verge of losing her heart and being found unworthy by the gods, but also her life, when every blood-soaked thread that holds her world together begins to unravel. Okay, the next book that I wanted to talk about was The City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. So I loved this series as well, of course. It's the Devabad trilogy. Devabad. I'm not sure how to say it, I'm sorry. But it follows this young woman, Nari, and she is a thief in Egypt. She accidentally one night ends up summoning this powerful warrior legend to her. This is so hard to explain, but she ends up summoning this warrior legend to her, and they end up going on this epic adventure, and she finds out that all the legends and myths of Egyptian culture and, you know, Middle Eastern culture is true, or most of them are true. It definitely starts out slower, so I will tell you that. The first book is a ton of world building. It didn't feel like info dumping because she still goes on this whole epic magical adventure, but I think it still was slower for some. I loved it just because I felt that I got to learn so much about like these different legends. But the third book was definitely my favorite. Okay, moving on. This is taking forever. My favorite book of 2020. This is it. Okay, my camera died and it's getting darker. Great. My favorite book of 2020 has to be The House in the Cerulean Sea. I love this book. I cannot tell you how much I love it, except to do what I'm currently doing. It is amazing. It's like a warm hug, it's cozy, but it also talks a lot about prejudice and you know, choosing your own family. So I'm gonna read my own Instagram post description because just changing it from Goodreads, I think I did a pretty good job explaining that there, if you can see. So here's a quick quote from it. Sometimes our prejudices color our thoughts when we least expect them to. If we can recognize that and learn from it, we can become better people. Amazing quote, phenomenal. So this book was joyful, heart-wrenching, all the things. It follows Linus, who is a caseworker for magical children. He's this grumpy, middle-aged guy who just does his job and goes home to his cat and his records, and that's all he needs, or all he thinks he needs. And you know, he dreams of someday going on a vacation to the sea because he's never seen the sea, but he doesn't think it's really realistic. He just does his job. He tries to help these magical children in these orphanages, making sure that their places are up to code, and then that's it. He thinks that's enough for his life. He gets assigned a special case with the most unique magical children he's ever encountered, and learns that there is more to these children and also his life in general than he could have previously imagined. So I love this book. It's fantasy, you know, magical children without being high fantasy or unrealistic somehow, like or unimaginable. Like, these characters feel really close to you and really close to your heart. I think it was exactly what I needed in 2020. There's love in it. There's, you know, both romantic and familial love, chosen family. There's more to your life than just doing a job day in and day out and not finding joy in it. And there's people that are gonna love you, you know, you're special. And so, I don't know, I just really, really loved this one. It was my favorite of 2020, and it will stick with me. It will stick with me for a long time, to say the least. Okay, the last book that I have in this list, I'm sorry I've been going on forever, is The Institute by Stephen King. This is my first Stephen King book. I'm not huge in the thriller genre. So now we're kind of in thriller, but also fantasy. Like, there's definitely fantasy aspects to this book, but it's for sure a thriller too, as Stephen King does. So basically, this is a really long book too, and I started it like in 2019, I think, or yeah. When did I start it? I started it in 2019, I think, and then I left it for like a year and I wouldn't touch it because it kind of does have a slow start to it. And then finally I finished it in 2020 and I was like, what the heck was I waiting for? In the middle of the night, in a house on a quiet street in suburban Minneapolis, intruders silently murder Luke Ellis's parents and load him into a black SUV. The operation takes less than 2 minutes. Luke will wake up in the Institute in a room that looks just like his own, except there's no windows. And outside his door are other doors, behind which are other kids with special talents, telekinesis and telepathy, who got into this place the same way Luke did. So it's kind of got Stranger Things vibes. Really amazing book about these children with special powers and this whole institute. Like, what are they really using the kids for? What do they want them for? What's the point of abducting them and killing their families? And then the kids are trying to figure out what really happened too, and they of course have had to grow up way too fast because they recognize that they're being held captive and have probably lost their families. And so definitely this book is a wild ride, especially once you get halfway through, things start picking up and you have enough background to see kind of like to get where it's going, because it is a complex, you know, story. And so I think that's why in the beginning it really set up these different parts that all tie in later into the book. And this is a standalone book. And so I don't know, I really loved this. I am not a huge thriller girl. That's the one genre I think, well, not the one, but that's like a genre that I'm really lacking in, I think, is thriller. And I don't usually like scary things, but this book was not scary for me. It was thrilling, like its genre. There was just so much to it, and these kids like are so resilient and strong and are inventive, and it's just really cool to see. And it's spooky, but the end is, you know, it doesn't end off poorly, if that helps. I don't want to give any spoilers, but it was a really good introduction into Stephen King, I'll say that. Okay, so that is it, you guys. I am so happy that I got to make this video for you. I hope that it intrigued you to read even some of them, that I did a good enough job explaining them. Please let me know in the comments if you have read any of these, or after hearing this, which book you want to read the most, or if you have any recommendations for me for 2021. And I will keep you guys posted on these violent delights. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel. That would be amazing if you want to see more book updates. And I also do some travel vlogs and things like that when we're not in a pandemic. Thank you so much for watching this video and for being here with me in my top 12 books of 2020. I'm excited for everything that 2021 has in store in terms of reading and just life. So I hope you'll continue to join me for this journey. Thanks, guys. Bye.